Hello, and welcome to FilmSlam Stream's post-film conversation for How to Make Challah. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We're very pleased to be joined by the director of How to Make Challah, Sarah Rosen. Sarah is a writer-director based in New York. Her narrative and documentary short films have played at festivals worldwide. Her documentary, which you just saw, How to Make Challah, premiered in 2024 at the New York Jewish Film Festival at Lincoln Center and screened at Rooftop Films Summer Series. She has developed TV series with production companies in Tel Aviv and London. Her essays and journalism have been published in the New York Times, Harper's, and more. Hello, Sarah, and welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
It's so great to have you here as well. Before we get started, first I want to ask you, have you made challah?
I have made call.
Okay, great. That's good. So we don't have to worry about you um, um, digging up a video to learn how to do it. But it's just interesting. What a gift to your family to have a piece of archival information and current information, and for generations to last. So. Tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea to, make this film.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker, and I think it's really the greatest gift I could have been given is that my aunt, who is not a filmmaker professionally, took a class when she was my age, in her 30s, in filmmaking, and as part of that class, filmed her grandmother making challah, which was the archival footage that you saw. Um, And she then had this amazing footage. So, it was such a gift for me to be able to make something of that. Um, I knew that this footage existed. We had sort of found it and then lost it and then found it again. And my aunt Jane, who I'm very close with, who lives in Manhattan and I live in Brooklyn, was saying it was during COVID, actually. It was during the pandemic. And it was a time when we didn't have as much to do. Everyone was at home and she was sort of daydreaming about, oh, we should make something. We should film our own version of it. As you saw in the film, she in my documentary, she denies that she ever requested making a challah film, but I have the receipts, I have the email to prove it. And so then I decided that it could be, at the very least, it would be an amazing thing for my family to have sort of through the generations, this repeated filmmaking. Um, she filmed my great grandmother making challah, and then I'm filming my Aunt Jane making challah. And at the most, I thought it could be a really, really interesting film.
Interesting. So when you approach your Aunt Jane, was she on board right away, or did you have to convince her?
She was on board right away, but I think she had no idea what was in store. As she really says in the film, she still says, she said, I didn't know it was about me. I thought it was, I'm not sure exactly what she had in mind, but she was very surprised that it turned out to be so much sort of a film about repeating that generational theme. Um, but she's been amazing. It's actually a very vulnerable thing to be in a film, to agree to be in a documentary film and to put yourself out there in that way. It can be difficult to see yourself on screen or to hear your voice if you're not used to it. That's a thing that people who aren't professional performers often experience. And Jane was just amazing. She's so funny, and I think now she really appreciates the film and has been enjoying the process of seeing it and sharing it with people and sharing her story.
Yeah, she's a celebrity, thanks to you. But the way you put this film together, did you know going into shooting that you were going to put it together this way, or did you decide to how to put it together in post?
That's such a great question, especially for this film, because this was my first real documentary film. And it worked. My process working on it was very different from the other films that I've made, which have been, for the most part, fiction narrative films, which rely very heavily on a script, on knowing exactly what you're going to shoot, knowing how things are going to go. And of course, there are surprises. But this film, in contrast, was really entirely about the editing process. So I had ideas of what I wanted to shoot and sort of what how things might go. I knew that I wanted to repeat the process of making the challah with Jane, but the whole structure of the film and the story and storytelling elements that are really important for a film, like what's the conflict, what's the motivation of the character, those things we had to really find in editing. And the editor on the film, Matt Shapiro, was an amazing collaborator on it, and the success of the film has so much to do with him and the other contributors to the post-production process, the music, the animation. There's so many elements that were really brought in by other artists I collaborated with.
And and Jane too herself, she was just a character herself. I like that part when she pretended to drink the egg mixture too. You know, the timing of putting that in there just worked well, along with the graphics that she added in as well too, and just her, you know her well because she's your family member, but just her like elusive, absent-minded, but smart, brilliant, clever, funny, just all came together. And you captured that really well. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that she comes through so clearly in this
Mhm.
film, and it was a big reason that I wanted to do it, is that she's such a character. I love her so much, and I think both she and my great-grandmother, Ida, who unfortunately I never got to meet, they both are kind of unconventional people in different ways. Like, I think that part of the reason the film came out as well as it did is that it's a very sentimental concept, right? I'm going to go bake something with my grandmother or my aunt and talk about our family. And it could come out like sickly sweet, but because of who they are as people, it's funny, it's biting, it's harsh. They just are both such full people who have such a good sense of humor and are so sort of unsentimental in who they are. Um, and I think that really comes through.
And it does because a lot of films, I mean, you've seen a lot of films like me, which the director makes a statement, this is my film, the way that they edit it and have the sound mix and so forth. Or some films are just dominated by their subjects too. But this was just a nice blend in which you weren't pulled one way or the other. So that's one way it really worked well. Let's We have students that are watching this. Some of them are familiar with Holler. For those who aren't familiar with Holla and what it means and so forth, can you just briefly explain that?
Absolutely. So challah is a kind of bread. It's a traditional bread for the Jewish people. It's something that we Jews are supposed to make every Friday night, which is our Sabbath for Shabbat dinner. And traditionally, it's something that it's often made by Jewish women throughout, the generations. It was often made by Jewish women. And it is a ritualistic, also religious spread. There's a prayer that you make that you can say when you make it. We didn't do it in this version in the film. And you eat it with your Shabbat dinner. You say a prayer over it and you eat it. And it's this like delicious eggy, sort of chewy bread. I love it. As you can see, Jane feels less enthusiastic about the actual flavor of the bread itself. But it's a very important part of Jewish cuisine all over the world.
Absolutely. And by this film, you've encouraged people who aren't familiar with, Jewish customs and foods and so forth to absolutely research even more. And I can see teachers inviting students to talk about some of their customs that they have to help share. So this is very, it opens up a lot of doors for conversations and bringing
Yeah.
people in.
I think that food is such a great way into learning about different cultures and different communities and religions and people around the world. And every community has their ritualistic bread or the thing that they always eat and they always make. And um, it's kind of a great, yeah, it's a great way to learn about other people and about your own families as well.
So the screening of this film, screened in New York, what was the response to this film? I mean, I'm sure you were nervous. It's like, I hope it comes off well. I hope I'm not offending anyone and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that whole screening.
Yeah, I was really nervous. As I said, I was so happy that when you make a documentary, you worry a lot about the subjects of the film and how they feel about being on display. And thankfully, Jane was amazing. And my grandmother, Ida, is long since passed away. So she didn't get a say. So that was a little bit of a relief of her not worrying about being revealed, though hopefully she would have enjoyed it. Um, the New York audience was very appreciative. They really got the humor, which I think is a huge part of the film. And there was a lot of laughter and like a kind of knowing laughter. And I think that, you know, a lot of people who the Jewish audience were so connected to it, the New York audience were so connected to it. But I think that a lot of people who aren't Jewish and aren't New Yorkers also really relate to it. Like it reminds them of their immigrant grandmother who's kind of cranky. I've heard that from a lot of people. Um, and that is very rewarding to me. It was really, I was so happy after the screening. I was so freaking nervous before the screening.
I bet you were. And you've done other films, but this is a little more personal too.
Totally.
But that's it. Now, have there been any plans to like do anything else with Jane to maybe have her do something else or coming up?
Ooh, what a good question. You know, I did think about, is this film, could this be a feature length, a full length film? But I think that one of the pieces of magic around this film is that the length is really suited to the activity. Like it's really meant to be a short film. But Jane has been coming around on, been a festival tour. You know, the film has been all around the country and all around the world. We haven't been able to travel yet internationally to any of the screenings, but we traveled a lot. We went to Boston, we went to Philadelphia, and Jane has been really enjoying that process as well. Um, and it's been, yeah, it's been very rewarding to bring it to communities
I
around
bet.
the
Well,
country.
to tell me this, Sarah, what does this say? This film, you spent a little bit of time on it, but the budget probably wasn't that large. It was probably more invested in travel and to festivals. And you worked on other films that had bigger budgets, but maybe not the same response. So what does it say to making a film like this and the way it was put together?
It's such a great question, and you're totally correct that I've had bigger budgets for other films that I think have turned out not as well. Like, I'm much prouder of this film, which had really a shoestring budget. It was a tiny budget. Um, and you know, the crew on the actual production itself, it was like 3 people. It was, we had Yael on boom, we had Amelia, the amazing cinematographer, me, and Jane, and that was it. That was the whole production team, which is a tiny, tiny team. You know, even a set of like 20 people on the crew is a very small crew. So I think it's really a testament to what really matters about each film. You know, this was a kind of film that we could make really cheap, and we had the gift of this archival footage. I think if there is sort of a lesson to be gleaned from this process, it's that if you pick the right ingredients, you can make something really very inexpensive. And also how much money you put into something and how it turns out isn't necessarily, there isn't necessarily a causation between those things. Um, So yeah, it's been inspiring. I mean, obviously you want a bigger budget because you want people to be paid fairly, and this was not that situation. But um, yeah, you can make something great for really a small amount of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a proof that can be done. Before we wrap up here, you talked about the crew. It's such a small crew. Tell us a little bit about the production. I take it that was Jane's house, and how many days did you film, and how
Yeah.
many did you spend in post?
Yeah. So we filmed for 1 day. I was there with the team, Amelia Gashich, the cinematographer, Yael Nachahon, the DP. We had an all-female crew, so that's pretty rare and was very exciting. Of course, it was just, a few people. But it's still a very male-dominated industry, and of course, everybody who wants to make movies should be making movies. But women are underrepresented in the industry, and we were really excited to have such a good representation there. Um, we were there in Jane and Elliot, my uncle's apartment. There's this great, cool old artist loft that they have in Manhattan. Um, and it was a really long, really exhausting day. And then the post-production process was so different. It wasn't a sort of intensive process where I sat down with the editor every day and we worked on it. It was actually really drawn out. And we sort of would come back to it and then leave it for a few months and then come back to it. And we edited it probably for about, I think, over a year, maybe a year and a half. So that that's really notable, that kind of percentage. It shows how much it developed and came together in the post-production process.
Exactly. Is there something that you would do differently now that everything's all said and done?
There's one shot at the end of the film. It's the kind of great moment when Jane says that she would never do it again. I say, would you make challah again? And she says, no, which was not scripted and was all her and was so funny. And there's a light in the back. You can see a light. Like there are some production elements that did suffer because I was directing it, because we had such a small team. I was directing it. We didn't have anybody who was officially on costumes or sound or production design or anything. So you see our mic wires hanging out in a few places. You see the light. So there's an argument that, oh, it adds to the sort of charm of that it's homemade. And I might say that in a different context in my own defense, but no, like it would be great if if we did not see those elements in the shoot.
But that's fine. I mean, I did notice it, but it just added to it. It didn't take away from it at all. And
Exactly. I'm paying
and,
you to
and
say that.
I'm sorry. No,
I'm
no,
paying
no.
you
It,
to
it
say
no, no, no. Not seriously, it didn't because I look at the overall, process in the film. But one thing about the challah, um, Jane actually made that herself. You didn't go out and buy some and have it prepared along the way, and or did you?
No, she joked that, oh, you could go out and buy a challah and make it look like I made it. But no, those were the real
I
challah
thought so too.
that she
Yeah,
made.
and having her braided too as well. Too. That
Yeah,
was cool. That takes a while. Uh,
it is a long process, and as you saw, we skipped steps. So
mhm.
by the end of the film, you can kind of tell we're exhausted. She's like, "Oh God, we're finally putting it in the oven." It is baking bread is a pretty intense process.
Yes, and waiting. And what about the idea for waiting for the yeast to rise and watering the plants? Who came up with that idea?
I think that just happened. I mean, Jane was just that's one of the great things about our relationship is that she felt we were so comfortable with each other. So as a filmmaker, that's a gift because she was very natural and was just, living her life. And she just went over and started watering the plants. That's her regular thing. And because I am outside of it, I can appreciate how quirky it is and how one, visual. She has all of these plants and she's watering it with the milk container, and that there's such a funny charm, and it shows so much of her character that she does that. But she just started doing that. That's just who she is.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. This has been a great conversation. Are you working on anything now that we can see soon?
I am working on a lot of different things, probably nothing you can see soon. A lot of things in development, a TV
Mhm.
show, a few feature films, a few short films. So we'll see. Stay tuned.
We absolutely will. Sarah Rosen, director of How to Make Challah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. All the best to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about our upcoming events, please visit us at clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.